Welcome to the Self Seeker channel. Today we are here with Paul Benhaim. Lovely to have you join us, Paul. And we are actually at your property in Mullumbimby. It's such a beautiful place.
Welcome, Nick.
So I would like to ask you a few questions because I think you have a lot to offer to the world with the work that you do. To begin, I would like to request you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, that's a big question, but I'll share what I can. I've been on this planet a few years now, a few rotations of the sun, and was actually born in the UK, in London. I had a pretty average middle class upbringing, brought up on kind of McDonald's and television and microwave meals. When I was introduced, I think I was about 15, to my first cannabis joint, in one of only two jobs I've ever had working for anybody else in my life. It was my uncle's real estate business. And the guy that worked for him came and offered me to try cannabis. So I remember that very clearly for the first time, kind of creeping up my stairs in my parents' house, laughing at the experience. I found that very fun. But it wasn't really until I think I was about 17 when one of my best friends said, "Hey, do you want to try LSD?" And I had no idea what that was at the time, really. But I took my first tab and looked at the carpets, and they started talking and moving to me. And I had, I guess, what I call a life-changing experience ultimately. That led me to studying and looking more about the history of psychedelics and looking at, I guess, people reading books from Aleister Crowley, being in the UK, who really, dive deep into these things. Terence McKenna, who was around London at the time, obviously looked back into the not too distant past in where people like Ken Kesey were looking at psychedelics, and all the studies at Stanford University, which I found very fascinating, especially because I consumed more than once, went into the forests in London and consumed the psilocybin there and had a number of experiences that basically led me to giving up school before I completed it. And that led to a time where I decided to go to Asia for for travel. But I did that instead of working or finishing my university degree. I thought I was going there to go and have fun and be on a party beach, which I did. That's where I went to. I went to a place called Koh Phangan, but when I went, there was no roads, no electricity. And I spent a week there. I remember taking LSD on the beach, partying, have great fun. But it was within a 1 week that I discovered that there was something else and that I was interested. Is like, wow, I've never left London really, and by myself, and now I'm in this Asian culture which I'd never been to. I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. So I looked on the notice boards for interesting things, and I saw something called a meditation retreat. I kind of read about meditation and mindful practices when looking and learning about psychedelics in some form, and ended up going to a small place on the island which I had to get a boat to. There were no roads to it, and it was a monastery with a Vipassana 10-day silent meditation retreat. So I had no idea what I got myself into, but I can tell you that certainly changed my perspective and life and interest. And it was from there that I guess my lifelong study and interest in mindfulness, and ultimately in what the meaning of enlightenment is, what the meaning of living in life is, started. That led me to move from that place in Thailand, not back to the party beach, but instead to go and visit the cultures, and particularly of northeast Thailand, where I hung out with local tribes to observe, didn't know what I was observing, didn't know why I was there. They didn't speak a word of English. I didn't speak a word of Thai, maybe a few words, and that was it. But I observed, and not speaking the language was actually another lesson for me. It was to learn that you can communicate without words. That was a really big lesson for me where I've been brought up, learning English, and in England, it's a kind of important subject there. So I observed, I saw a few things that, again, pictured what the rest of my life was going to be like. One, I pictured how people live in community, so how people work together to create community and how important that is. Two, I learned what the foods are a big part of that. Food is something that's universal that we all consume, and it brings all of us together in some way. And I also learned about medicine to some degree, that these people who are living in literal shit, I mean, like, it's mess. No, I was brought up, as I said, middle class London. You wash your hands before your meal. You make sure you have your clean clothes on every day. I still recommend having clean clothes on every day, mostly, at least when in public. And but what I noticed that these people never did any of that. Yet they were the healthiest, most vibrant people I'd ever seen. And I grew up in London, multicultural, every culture you can imagine in London, of every form, and everyone was similar kind of energy, where these people were vibrant, healthy, and living. So I wondered why that was. And that was actually the beginning of my study of food and nutrition, where I decided to go and get books on the subject and dive deep. And ultimately that led to my interest in essential fatty acids, omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids particularly, and how the incorporation of those things are critical to human health. Now, at that time, fish oils weren't popular. No one knew about GLA, EPA, all these different essential fats and forms of fats and why they were good for you. But I did recognize that these were not being used so much in the West because of processed foods. So when you process foods and put them in the supermarket and the manufacturer care about shelf life, because they need to not put the food in the shelf, and if someone doesn't buy it, they have to throw it away. So they want it to last a long enough time that people have a time to go and buy it, and then they can make some more. To do that, you can't have essential fatty acids because they don't last long. They're not shelf stable for a very long time. We have learned with new technologies a little bit better how to make it last a little bit longer, but generally they can't be used in high processed foods, and as I said, they don't last for years. So I realized that, wow, that's why eating natural foods directly from the garden is really good for you. Now, I've learned since there's other reasons why eating direct foods naturally unprocessed from the garden are really good for you. That's why I have my own veggie garden here, and I try to eat as local and fresh as possible. These are all things that supported that information about food and nutrition. Food and nutrition was always at the back of my mind. I continued traveling back and forth from the UK to Asia. I wanted to learn more, wanted to study. I just came back with books. I ended up going to India, and I went to the Himachal Pradesh, where I found myself in Dharamshala. I sat down with a backpack full of books and studied and studied and studied. Some of those books are actually behind me over here, and just keen to learn more. One of the people I met was from Canada while I was in Asia. And they offered me to come and visit their home sometime. I was free, could study and learn wherever I wanted, so I chose to go to visit them. And they took me to a shop in Montreal, where I went to what I thought was going to be a really hippie shop. And ultimately, the guy who owned the shop, his name was Dylan. Dylan, I love you. But he was a hippie. He had long hair and he had a 6-foot bong, and what I thought would be the owner of a cannabis shop. And he was an owner of this cannabis shop. And I looked at what he was selling, and it was like, yep, cannabis, yep, cannabis clothing, yep, I had seen that before, fantastic. Cannabis paper, great, save the forest, save the trees, really cared about that, still do. Think that's really important. But one thing he had that really piqued my interest was he had a handmade, pretty much snack bar, which had hemp seeds in them. And I was like, well, he said, and he offered me one. I was like, no, I don't want to get high. I'm just coming to visit your store because my friend said I should come and visit. And he said, no, you don't get high. These are really good for you because they contain essential fatty acids. And as soon as he said that, obviously my ears pricked up, and I was like, wow, essential fatty acids in hemp. That's really cool. So this plant that people are using for all of these different uses, textiles, paper, plastics. He was actually running his car on cannabis oil, so which is a diesel engine, which I found fascinating. They were all really interesting to me, and many other things we'll talk about shortly. But what was most fascinating was the fact that hemp seed contained the perfect balance of omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids. So working on that, I basically had to read more and really study that more. And that led me to meeting a guy called Dr. Udo Erasmus. He is, I believe, still one of the world's leading fats and oils doctors. And he had written a book, again behind me here, called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. And I studied and had read that book already in Thailand, studying about fats and oils. And I did notice there was a one paragraph in a thick book like this, talking about the benefits of essential fatty acids in hemp seeds. So I found it fascinating how someone who is the world's leading expert at something talks about what is the ideal food source of the best balance of the essential fatty acids, which are the most important forms of fat in the world. And he only talks about it for one paragraph in a really thick book. So I tried to communicate and ask him these questions. Why is that? I ended up traveling to America, where I heard that he was at a natural products conference, a natural products expo, health expo. And I met him on the dance floor after a long day, and I cornered him and said, Udo, what are you doing telling only people in one paragraph about this? Isn't cannabis, doesn't get you high, does it? And he's like, no, it doesn't get you high. And essential fatty acids are the most important forms of fat that people need to have. Yes, he said. I said, and they're not processed. So I understand that people need to eat them in a fresh source, like hemp seeds, just as they are. And he's like, yes. I said, so why are you only talking about it in one paragraph of your book? And he said to me something that, again, changed my career and focus completely from hemp to hemp foods at that point in time, which was, well, people believe that hemp gets you high, and hemp and cannabis have a really bad reputation. So I'm like, okay, but you just said they don't get you high and it's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. There's no negatives. In fact, it's all the best things. He said, yes. So I said, why aren't you doing it? He said, well, I don't want to put my name to such a plant as this bad reputation. So young, naive, I don't care about my reputation. I care about science and facts. And this is what I've been studying. I've seen the direct results and health results of this product myself, of essential fatty acids. I've been living in Asia where these people all have great natural sources of essential fatty acids. And now I've discovered that there is a source, a bird seed called hemp, that I could basically put into humans, and it will literally make them better and healthier, more vibrant, and better skin, better hair, better immune system, all these wonderful things. So that was it. That was my mission. I was going to go and do that. So I went straight back to the UK, and I went to go, anyway, can I help you? Can I volunteer my time to support anybody promoting hemp foods? There was nobody. And I was like, weird. I'm like offering my time. I want to just help them. I need to get it out there. I've got all this energy. So I went back to the reading books, and I went to look at Jack Herrera's book, one of the first books I read on hemp, which had all these 25,000 different uses of hemp. And so I went back to all the foods and the history of where they came from. And I could see all around the world, China, Egypt, etc. But I was more interested in Europe, close to where I was in the UK. And there was some records I could find were back into Hungary, in Poland. So basically those two countries had used hemp as far back as they could imagine. Hemp seeds had always been legal in the UK and Europe. It had never been made illegal, and was only being used for bird foods, which I found ridiculous. So I went to go and find a source. So I went to Hungary. I was like, okay, it's around the corner. I'll just get on a plane. So I went to Hungary. But I did ask my friends, thankfully, in advance if they knew anyone in Hungary, and my friends knew people in the textile industry in Hungary and hemp. So they took me to the farmers where they were buying the hemp fiber from. and translated for me to these traditional farmers and right out in the middle of the fields in Hungary, to take me to my first crop of hemp seeds. And it was that first crop of hemp seeds that I found, and I was like, that's the stuff. I want to buy that stuff. How much do you want to buy? I'm like, I should that much. They ended up basically selling me my first ton of hemp seeds on 2 pallets. I got those shipped to the UK, didn't even know where to store them. So I had to ask a friend if I could store them in the garage. Then I looked at them going, what do I do with this? I was like, how do I get people to eat birdseed? That's basically what I'm telling them to do. I got fresh bird seeds, which I knew was the healthiest form of these hemp seeds. And then I thought back to the things that I'd been studying in Asia again, which was food and nutrition. I learned that hemp is not the only source of essential fatty acids. It's the best source, absolutely, but there are other sources. Sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, all contain different types of essential fats in different balances. So I decided what if I put them all together? So I was back in Asia again, in India particularly, where I just played around with some recipes. And then when I found a recipe I liked, I brought it back to the UK. I went to a baker there and said, hey, can you make me this recipe? I made it in my kitchen, shared it with friends. They loved it. And he said, yeah, sure, I can make it. It's like, yeah, and I'm going to go and promote it. And I'm going to, everyone's going to buy it in the whole world. And, I was like a bit naive at the time about what it would take, but I did that. So eventually, I took that to friends, took it to the local health food store. They bought some, fantastic. Then I took it to another health food store. They wanted it. Then they asked me for some more, and I was hand making these and cutting them up with this guy. And then I went to a trade show in London. Everyone ignored me. Like, I'd made handmade designs for a label. I called it 9 bar because it contained 9 ingredients. It was also another name for slang of the use of the word cannabis, which was fun for me because people who knew that. People who didn't, it was just 9 ingredients, 9 grams of protein in the bar. And no one took any interest. I thought, I'm not giving up. Maybe in Europe they'll have a better chance. So I went to a show called BioFac in Germany. And I had a stand there, really small stand. And then this Canadian came up in Germany. So I live in Germany. I understand the essential fatty acid content. I heard about that in Canada, and you're making a product. I totally want to sell that. Can you sell me 10,000 bars to sell here in Germany? I'm like, yes. It was like my first win in business. So I went back to the UK to my baker. I said, it's so exciting. I need 10,000. He's like, 10,000 bars? I don't know if I have time. I've got all this bread to make. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's my first sale. He said, don't worry, I'll introduce you to a new baker. So he took me to another bakery, and I had to show them my formula. We had to negotiate how it was going to be made. Anyway, bottom line is they made these food product. I sold my first 10,000 bars. And then a few years later, it became, well, one, it was the first hemp food snack bar in the UK and in Europe ever commercially sold. No, but within a few years, it was in every single supermarket. I had sold hundreds of thousands. Now there's millions of them being sold. It is one of the most successful hemp food products ever in existence.
Wow.
So that was my first kind of business, and learning to create a business like, as basically a hippie traveling around the world in Asia and discovering these things, to actually creating a product that everyone wanted. I had to learn quickly about business and contracting manufacturing, and then getting help in administration and designs. And I was doing all those things. And then as you get bigger, you have to get help. So I learned a little bit about how to build businesses. And when I was at school, I was studying psychology and law. So those kind of things helped me: psychology in terms of marketing, and law in terms of actually supporting me, making sure I made the right decisions and how to set up a business, and I could do accounting, etc. So that was all really a good start to my career. That continued, where I then developed lots more hemp food products for other companies as well, because I realized that I'd learned tricks to use essential fatty acids without destroying the essential fats, using hemp seeds. And the reason people kept coming back to buy more was that they would consume hemp seeds, their body would react really well. They didn't know that, except they had a desire for more. So having a desire for more made them buy more, which was great. The more essential fatty acids they had, the more they felt better. It was a win-win circle, and that's why the business just went like that.
That was most interesting. So what happened after that?
Well, the hemp food journey became quite successful, and I was making money for the first time in my life, which I never really had a major interest in. I just made enough money to travel to the next country is all I cared about until then. And one of the things that I noticed while I was in Asia, and I'll come back to the hemp food story in a second because it does continue, just to be clear. But the while I was in the UK still, I had been traveling back and forth to Asia, and one of the things that I love, particularly about the Himalayas, one of my favorite places in the world, is hiking there. I enjoyed the pristine nature, and that's why one of the places I felt expansiveness and vision and being in clean places. This is kind of why I live in Mullumbimby now. Um, and I used to always tell the locals, don't get westernized, don't use plastic, don't use bad stuff. And they're like, I said, I live in a pristine place, and they said, no, 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 it's really dirty. I'm like, no, you have dirt, but it's not really dirty. You don't know what the West is like. We have, concrete everywhere, rubbish everywhere. And they said, we do too. I'm saying, no, 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 it's worse. And they said, no, we do too. I'm like, what do you mean we do too? And they said, no, no, we do too. You just don't see it. I'm like, what do you mean we don't see it? It's like, well, we're not meant to show, tourists, but you've been here like many years now. Let us take you for a hike. So they took me for a hike in the Himalayas above in the valley, above where I guess the more popular spots are. And they showed me where they dumped their rubbish. And it was like a mountain and pile of plastics like you wouldn't believe. And I was shocked, honestly, not just from the massive pile of rubbish that was there, but the fact that it was open, there was animals, insects, and it was right by a stream, upstream to where the tourists go swimming. And I knew they go swimming, and where the people were drinking from. I'm like, that is the kind of reason why people get sick. So it was that at those point there where I first went to explore that I realized that if there's something that I can do to change that, I will. So back to the UK, back to being successful with a hemp snack bar, which ended up, I was born in London and brought up over there, but I ended up moving to nature in northwest Wales on an island called Anglesey. And that's where I lived. Northwest Wales is where I produced that snack bar. It was very successful. And I used to hike in the Snowdonia Mountains. I like mountains, you may have guessed. I live sitting on one right now. And one of my hiking buddies, he was part of the Biocomposite Institute of the Bangor University. And I didn't realize, but it was one of the leading in the world in biocomposites. And he worked really closely with the professor there. And one day while hiking, and I was telling him that story, he was like, "Oh, well, if you ever want to make hemp plastics, let me know." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I would love to, but making plastics is like millions of dollars. You've got to be a big petrochemical corporation." He said, "No, no, no, Paul. That's what everyone thinks, but." If you know people like me, you can do these kind of things. I'm like, really? Like, great. So I said, please, can you, and let's do something. So anyway, he said to me, I gave him some hemp fiber from the crops from my farmers. And he basically worked with me to make the first hemp plastic product since Henry Ford. And Henry Ford was the only person I ever saw who basically compounded hemp and plastics together. And that was a really exciting moment for me. I made a hemp plastic frisbee. I actually got it in my office. I can show you shortly. And that frisbee was like, wow, if I can do this, I can make anything. So that evolved over time. Now I look back and go, wow, it's technically really bad, but it was still the first hemp plastic composite that was made from, ever that could be commercialized. I invested in that over time. Now, I'm going to come back to the hemp food story, and I'll come back to the hemp plastics as well. I have to mix the stories because they happen over quite a long timeline, is my career. I then came to Australia. I was headhunted to come here. I had already been here once, loved Australia, and I was headhunted to come here to set up their hemp foods industry here by a company that was already farming, already interested in the textiles and fabrics and this other industry, which they're still trying to build actually 30 years later. But I came here to set up the hemp foods, and they said, look, we can introduce you to the politicians. So I was living in Brisbane at the time, where they said, come to Brisbane. I went, okay. And I was like, okay. I said, like, they said, we'll give you half a company, we'll fund it all. You don't have to do anything. You just come and move here and like live here. And I looked around and go, yeah, this is a pretty cool place. Beautiful rainforest, oceans, nice people. And most importantly, no one knew about hemp. I was like, well, I can tell them that. I've just done that in the UK. It's easy for me to do. So I went, found manufacturers in Melbourne who could make these hemp snack bars cheaper and better. I went to meet the supermarkets, which are Coles and Woolworths, still are just Coles and Woolworths. And they actually wrote to us saying, yep, we'll sell your products if it's legal. I was like, great, no problem. That's all I need. Basically a letter saying that. And I went to the politicians and said, look, they want to eat it. It sells in Europe. Why don't we make it legal? And they said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And I basically took politicians to dinner all over in every state. And I thought, okay, well, this looks like it's going to work. So I'll move here. I moved here permanently, basically. Met the mother of my child, had a child here. Felt obviously this is going to be my home. Basically let go of my business in the UK, saying, well, I don't really need to be involved. I'll just take a royalty from whatever, and that fund me while I build this business up. And yeah, I had a time limit, of course, but I was like, oh, by that time, hemp foods will be wonderful here, and I'll be living in a beautiful place. So I did that. And a couple of years later, I was told the vote came, and John Howard was the prime minister at the time, and I was like, definitely going to say yes because I've seen all these ministers. And the vote came, and apparently it was a no. And I was shocked. All the people around me were shocked. And I'd already moved here. I already had a child. I'm like, now what? What the heck? How? Why? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It took a few years until I found out that apparently John Howard had handwritten notes saying hemp no way and passed it to the ministers. So, it's a bit of a small club. So when your boss basically says, don't do that, there's no reason. Like, we didn't pay them or give them big incentives. We just told them all the good things it would be for farmers, sustainability, nutrition, and we'll get some income like the rest of the world. And someone didn't want it somewhere. So it was fascinating to have been turned down. And it took years before I actually, where John Howard was completely retired and he was actually playing golf with somebody that I know. And I said to them, look, you play golf with John Howard. It's been like more than 10 years now. Just ask him what happened, why he wrote this note, which I only got from one minister, actually told me. The rest of them, I don't know, nothing happened, because you get a note, you throw it away. No, you need to do what your boss tells you. So I thought 10 years later, he's retired. Maybe he'll just share with his friend. And apparently he was so cagey. Like he said, my friend is like, oh, he always talks about stuff. But when I asked him about that, he just said, no, not talking about it. That was it, cut off the conversation. So I still to this day don't know why he was really against it. And I'm guessing some corporate interest somewhere didn't want that to happen at the time. So anyway, I found myself in a country where, my expertise in hemp foods, I'd written one book on the subject, thinking, what was going to be helpful to people, and I couldn't do that. So again, I came back to hemp plastics a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to then promote hemp plastics. It's a bit of a stretch, and I got to start again and with a new business, but I can do that. So I then created a CD case, a hemp plastic CD case, and I thought that's what I'm going to create because I want musicians who can access so many people around the world by their words and their lyrics to talk about the benefits of hemp, and they show it by the CDs that they sell. And I found with a few amazing artists. I connected with like Madonna, Michael Franti, Sting, all these people, artists that seem to have an interest in the environment, even with DVD cases, Leonardo DiCaprio, all these people, and managed to end up really, basically they all forwarded me to their manager, spoke with all their managers. The managers in the interview said, hey, is that cheaper? I was like, no, it's about 20 or 30% more expensive. Hardly anything, less than a cent, and a CD that you're selling for like $20 or $30. And I can't remember what they were selling the CDs for, but it was a very small proportion at the time. And they said no. I'm like, what do you mean no? Like, it's not much more, and you get to have something unique. What I didn't realize at the time was that was at the beginning of the end of the CD and DVD era. and the digital era was coming up. So they didn't want to spend any more money, even if it's a little bit less, they wouldn't care, because they were just trying to get rid of shit, because they couldn't sell CDs or DVDs. As today, or anyone sells DVDs or CDs. So they probably made the right decision from their perspective. Or I definitely made the wrong decision in choosing a CD or DVD case. So that was an interesting project. So therefore, I found myself having lots of time on my hands in Australia. So I was like, what do I do? Well, I ended up writing another 8 books on hemp. I helped people set up businesses around the world. I wrote a business course helping mentor people where hemp was legal, including in New Zealand, mainly in Europe and America. And I help people start up a number of different businesses. I help people look into hemp building. I helped a hemp building business. I help people in textiles, hemp textiles, and help someone set up a farming operation, a hemp processing operation, and that was all interesting for a period of time, but really not where my heart was at. So hence having so long to write all these books and to share that information for a while. Meanwhile, my son was growing up, so I was putting time and energy into that. So that was kind of a break. I got my second job ever in my life during that time on Sunshine Coast at a health retreat. I was offered a job at a health retreat. There was a 5-star health retreat. People were paying basically lots of money to come, had unlimited funds. I had a budget that was massive to support people in their health and wellness. So that allowed me to use my experience in health foods, including hemp, of course, raw foods, but also my work studies in psychology to help people heal from, to look to heal from people, things like cancer, where they tried everything else, using the latest in psychology, so I could get the best teachers from around the world and bring them in. So I managed that place for about 9 months. And it was only 9 months, but I loved it. It was fun. Working for someone else was quite different. And it only stopped for one reason, because someone I had met while I was still in the UK had this technology. And a technology that piqued my interest while I'm in Europe. And I'll tell you about that story, because I was at one of those food trade shows in Europe, the one I first became successful in, and another one of those that actually I saw a bunch of people starting to bring hemp products. And one of them had a bowl pretty much similar to this, maybe even this one, I don't know. But and said, hey, this bowl here is made from 100% hemp. And I was like, no, it's not, because I made the first hemp plastic product years ago now, but I made it, and I know that you need to use glues and resins to make these things, so you can't make it 100% hemp, and you don't need to, because it's still a step in the right direction. You're still sequestering carbon, and it's a sustainable material, biodegradable potentially, and recyclable. And he's saying, well, this is better. This is 100% hemp. So I said, if you keep paying people that, you're lying, and you're making the hemp industry that I've spent all this time building a bad reputation. So I'm going to tell people that you are doing the wrong thing. I'm going to get you kicked out of the trade show. He's like, no, it's true. And I'm like, I don't believe you. So I literally went to the organizer and said, you can't have him next year, because he's telling lies. It's not possible. And he was like, no, this is true. And that's my Austrian accent. Sorry if you're from Austria. And anyway, after the show, he made me an offer. He said, look, if you really don't believe me, come and I'll show you my factory, but you got to keep it super confidential. So ultimately, I was really intrigued by this material, because it feels good, looks good. And I said, okay, I'll take you up on that. So I flew into Vienna. Never been to Austria before. He picked me up, took me for lunch. He seems a nice enough chap. And he said, look, I'll take you to my factory. So off we went to up in the hills in Austria, in the mountains, round and round and round. And then he's like, we're about 10 minutes before we get there now. And before we get there, I want you to put a blindfold on. And I'm like, oh, this is a little bit weird. So I put a blindfold on, and I continued in the journey. And he said, look, it's just because it has to be secret where the location is. Then I was having this blindfold on and going, hold on. I'm in a car with someone who I tried to get kicked out of a trade show. I didn't believe, in a country that I don't know by myself. Not probably the cleverest thing I've ever done in my life. But I was young and brave and didn't care. And at that time, thinking I was invincible. Don't recommend this to anyone to ever do that. Never would I do that again these days. I was right though. He took me to this place, and later he explained, by the way, the blind products, because he hadn't patented his material. He didn't want anyone to know about his fact, super secret. Anyway, he showed me, and this is literally 100% hemp. There are no glues and resins in it, and it was just coloring. So phenomenal material, and I fell in love with that material. Anyway, the reason I went back there is to say that when I was back in Australia and I had nothing to do, he came to me and said, look, we've spent our millions of dollars and we can't commercialize this. Do you want to do that? So I left the health retreat. Yeah, come here. I was like, I'll run the business. I'll go and raise the capital. Raised $1 million, built a factory in Mullumbimby, brought him over here, and we developed a factory that produced the didgeridoos, light shades, vases, a whole bunch of different objects made from 100% hemp, which was another great, amazing business, beautiful material that I still love. But one thing I learned, another business lesson for me, was that it wasn't commercially sustainable. So in terms of, it takes a lot of effort, time and effort to make these didgeridoos, which is fine if you want to pay $1,000 for a didgeridoo. And professional didgeridoo players absolutely do for the best. And it is literally the best didgeridoo material in the world.
Wow.
I respect the land that we come from here and we stand on, where and the yidaki or the didgeridoo is not traditional to this land, but it is to other parts of lands in Australia. But these are supported by Indigenous people as well, and the use of them, because they do sound amazing, mainly because there's a lot of technology to make the sound reverberation and the density of the material. Massive university studies they spent on that. It was just wonderful. But it couldn't be mass produced, so that was a business lesson I learned. I eventually passed that business back to the people that with the technology, and others who are still running it. So the material still exists, still haven't massively commercialized it yet, but I still love the material. And part of moving away from that, it was because I then saw an opportunity in hemp foods again, and that hemp foods opportunity was the fact that still wasn't legal here. This was maybe 2014, 15, but it was 15 years later than when I tried to legalize it at the beginning of this country. And I started seeing my friends saying, hey, have you seen this? There's hemp seeds. I got these from a friend. And I looked at them going, wow, you got hemp seeds, but it's illegal. And they're like, yeah, but my friend got it in and you should try it. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. So, and I looked at it and it was really bad quality hemp seeds. And by the time I was quite an expert, I was like, shit, I don't want people to get the first impression of hemp seeds and have bad quality hemp seeds. So what I decided to do was just like, I'll just buy some for my friends and I'll get it from my friends in Europe, because I had all the sources in Europe. So I brought a few over and gave it to my friends. And again, same thing happened. I gave it to one friend, two friend, three friend, four friend. That shop wanted some, that shop wanted some. I was like, well, I better check on the legality of this, because I'm pretty sure it's not very legal. Then I looked into the law in depth, and the laws basically said hemp was not allowed for human consumption. And not for human consumption. I was like, what happens if I didn't sell it for human consumption? And there was no law saying it was illegal. So I was like, great. So I got a friend made me a map of the world and say hemp is legal everywhere except for the countries marked in white, and only Australia was white. Every other country was black. And so if you live in a country that's in black, you can consume this seed in this packet. If you don't consume it. And of course, everyone's like, you're joking. Of course I'm going to consume it. So I managed to do that marketing and then actually make packaging and then sell it to a health food store, 2 health food store, 3 health. Now that company, Hemp Foods Australia, is the largest hemp foods manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere.
Wow.
It literally owns like 90% of the market, I think, right today, and it's continuing growing in its success. So that's what I ended up building. And that was a fun growth. I still fully support them. I'm still a shareholder in the business. And that led me again to the next part of my journey, which was actually in hemp CBD medicine. So hemp CBD medicine is something that I learned from a girl called Charlotte Figge. And the Figge family in the US, and they were made popular by Sanjay Gupta on CNN radio. I watched this on the internet and I thought, wow, that sounds way too good to be true. There's this girl who had like hundreds of seizures a day. She took 1 drop of this oil, immediately stopped, like immediately. Had like 1 or 2 seizures a week from then on. So I was like, it sounds a bit weird, but I had money. I was successful in hemp foods. I was like, I'm flying to America. I'm finding out. I want to see these people in person, look face to face, and see if they're real or they're just being paid to say this stuff because they're Americans. And I met them, and they were such a beautiful, humble family who literally told me the story. Literally, the mother for the first 8 years of this child's life never put the baby down once. Day, night, slept, woke, everything, because the baby was continually having fits, taking him to the doctors and hospitals, having every test. It was awful story. I mean, like, why you just can't imagine how exhausting that would be to look after your child. But of course, you're going to do what you can. And they were told and recommended to try hemp CBD medicine. They tried it once, and as I said, they said, "You can see her. She's sitting at a table drawing. I'm leaving her now. She's nodding my arms." I'm like, "Wow!" It was like. So then I looked into what CBD was, what the medicine was, and I had already studied it many years ago, and some amazing doctors had taught me about it when I was still in the UK, actually in the 90s. I never took too much note about it because it's just another one of those things, and I was quite busy and successful with hemp foods. But this time I was like, no, I really got to look into how it's made. And I did, and the company that was making it from a very particular form of hemp. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I can make that from industrial hemp, make it so much cheaper and affordable to so many people. So I'm going back to my friends in Europe saying, can you help me make this? And they said, sure, we can do that. It's easy. I'm like, great, make it for me. Send me buckets. And they did. And they sent it here, and I then gave it to some people, and I was like, amazing results. But not just from epilepsy, from pain, from anxiety, people with different diseases. And I looked into the scientific papers, and I will share that at your event shortly, but they are just phenomenal, the research behind CBD. And I was like, wow. So I started selling that again to friends, family, and then that just took off crazy. Then I thought, wow, if that's taking off in Australia, maybe I should help the people in America and make it cheaper. So I flew over to America, and met a friend of a friend and said, hey, do you want to buy some and maybe help sell it in around your area in Colorado? I said, sure, I'll give it a go. And within a few weeks, he was like, yeah, people like this stuff. Can you get me more? Yeah, sure, get more. And then with a couple of weeks later, he's like, I don't know if I want to keep buying this from you. I was like, what do you mean? I thought it's working really well. I said, no, it is. I said, what do you mean then? He's like, I want to like run the company myself. I was like, I was like, maybe you can invest in mine and we'll set up a business and you can be a partner. So we did that deal. He became my partner. And together we built up one of the best CBD companies in the world, which we ended up growing. And I brought that company, it was called Elixinol, in with Hemp Foods Australia. And I ended up listing that on the ASX here in Sydney at $100 million valuation, and brought it to a $600 million valuation. So all that from, just basically giving it to friends to I built up one of the biggest countries. We employed 160 people and really around about 60 million US revenue a year in that business at its peak when I was involved. So, for me, that was like, okay, successful business, don't need to work again. And I eventually started to pull myself back into a director's role, chairman's role, and then stepping back. So I could get involved with other projects that I cared about, and I still cared about that, of course. But when you have a lot of people running it, you don't need to need to be there anymore for it to work. So I allowed that to happen. So that ended up leading me to a new iteration of hemp plastics, kind of my third try, I guess. But this was a really clear focus. So I'll now share that story on hemp plastics. So that was set up when a friend came, and because I'd been successful, people keep coming with ideas of different businesses, and I've been pretty good at like culling out 90% of the ideas that come to me and saying, no, been done, no good. Easy, and 10% I might spend like a few days looking at, and that out of those 10%, and maybe 1% of those will get past that. So 1 in 100 ideas I'll actually look at and talk to and discuss those things. And one of them was a guy who came in and basically said, I got an idea with hemp plastics. And I was like, go away, tried it twice. Not commercial because of this, and not commercial because of this. So I learned from the CD and the high flight era, and then the didgeridoo and this material. And he said, no, I've got a solution to both of those things. One is I don't need any specific machinery like this material does. Don't need, you can use existing machinery. And number two, I can make it cheap and eventually cheaper than regular plastics, which is better, fix the first issue basically. So I said, well, if you can really show me how you can do that, then we'll do something. And he did. He showed me how we can do that. Okay, great. Here you go. Let's set up a company. I'll fund it. You can have half the shares, but then we got to build the company up. So I did. He became a partner. Sadly, he passed away not that long ago. As we're still building the company, but that company is looking like it will make a significant difference in the world of plastics by using hemp, and will probably be one of the largest, if not by probably the largest user of hemp in the world. So that's the hemp plastic company, where we can make pretty much any product for any company, and we're looking at that in very large quantities, generally train loads are what we look for in our customers that are capable of buying train loads of plastics, and that's basically the unit of measurement for us now. So originally it was like bags, then it was boxes, then it was crates, then it was pallets, then it was small containers, then big containers. Now I won't move to train loads and ship loads. So haven't got there yet, but that's where I think hemp plastics is going. So it's a really exciting business. I'm just chairman of that company and the board. We've got operations predominantly in the USA. We're also working closely in Asia to expand that, where there's obviously a lot of plastics, and I'm very excited to come support them with some more sustainable options. And again, I can talk more details about that at the conference for you. Then more recently, in the last couple of years, I'll talk about my current main passion,
Yeah.
which I'm really deeply involved in personally, which is really a way that's kind of brought all the different aspects of hemp and cannabis in together. And first of all, I'll define that for you. People say, what is the difference between hemp and cannabis?
Yes.
Now, cannabis is one plant, full stop. Hemp is a common term for the form of cannabis that doesn't have high quantities of THC, doesn't get you high. Marijuana is a general term, and there's many other terms for the form of cannabis that does get you, makes you feel high. So that's the only difference, but they're both exactly the same plant. They look the same, grow the same, smell the same. You couldn't tell the difference until you actually consume them, if that's what you're using them for. But you can use the same plant for making plastics, for textiles, for making car oil, to run on books and paper, foods, all these different things. Same plant, cannabis can be hemp or marijuana, can be used for all of these things. So during my career, I have always, especially being a public company director for much of it, made a really clear definition saying, yes, we work with hemp, and hemp is not marijuana. And yes, there is a marijuana industry, and that's recreational and medical. Now, I was a big speaker when I was young, just to be clear, so I know all about the recreational side. But during most of my career, I actually gave up smoking. As I'm really so dedicated to this that I have to really show that we're serious here. So I can't smoke. I can't have my long hair down here anymore. I used to have all these other things that I gave up for helping the plant. But now, in retrospect, I realized that that was kind of giving up something, and partly giving up a bit of the truth. And the truth is that it's one plant. We shouldn't be separating these two differences between this one cannabis plant and the part that had been used for getting high and smoking, and is generally abused by most people in the world who use cannabis, I find, has got a really bad reputation, but can be used in a really positive way. And even being involved for nearly 30 years, it was only a few years ago where I discovered that cannabis is, one, a true psychedelic, and two, can absolutely be used that way safely when part of a protocol. Now, how did I realize that? Well, a couple of things. One is, a few years ago, I saw the next industry would be psychedelics and the promotion of psychedelics. And I saw the opportunity, well, someone has to make these things. I learned that in the hemp industry. Someone has to make these things. So I looked at creating psilocybin, particularly psilocin, which is the active ingredient in psilocybin, which is what psilocybin is magic mushrooms. Um, and I was looking to one, manufacture that, and two, offer clinical studies to show that it works. So I'd already built public companies. I could raise the capital to do that. So I set up a trial for psilocybin in Australia. And I'd also had experience working with some of the best people in the world now. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go and find the best people in psychedelic therapy that I can find in America and the UK. So I asked my friends who are the best, and I kind of had an idea, and I made a short list, and I contacted them. And I'd say 8 out of 10 of them all said yes. So I created a board basically, including the head of Johnson and Johnson, Southeast Asia, the person who also worked for Janssen, creating the only legal psychedelic on the planet today, which is esketamine. The person who headed the whole product development, he became the chairman of my board advisory. I had someone from the Imperial College London, really heavily working with psychedelics and all the trials over there. He was also on my board. I had a head psychiatrist here. I had professors. It was like a dream board for me. And together we created a protocol over a year or so, which required lots of regular meetings. So I really studied the depths of psychedelics and how that was being used in science. And I recognized it was a long haul and just required lots of money. So I raised a good amount of money. And then I was like, okay, we're going to take this public and then join that race if we're going to do this properly to get enough money. And sadly, that was the beginning of the financial crisis that happened globally. And then COVID happened, and all those things really stopped the funding sources for these businesses. So we ended up deciding as a group to cut that down to just manufacturing and let go of the clinical studies. So the company continues today, and they're looking at biosynthetically producing psilocin in Australia for clinical studies and when it's legal. That aside, the point of that was that gave me, really in-depth focus on the protocols, which when I put that together with my head with cannabis, going, well, hold on, cannabis is legal today in Australia medicinally. Therefore, I can offer cannabis psychedelic therapy using a regular psychedelic protocol. Why is nobody doing that? But it's the same why is nobody doing it as I had for hemp plastics and for hemp foods. It's like, it doesn't last long for me, that why is nobody doing that? Oh, I just do a check. No, really nobody's doing that. I'm going to do it then. So I went ahead and did it. I did find at least one company in the US that is doing something similar, which is great. But apart from that, there's certainly nobody in Australia, and maybe there's others in the world. I just haven't seen them or found them yet. So I said, well, I'm going to make a noise about this. So I spent the last couple of years developing a protocol with some of the best people that I could find that were related to parts of the protocol for offering cannabis psychedelic therapy. So that's really where I'm focused at today. That's my offerings out to the world, and I'm really excited to share the details of cannabis psychedelic therapy, make it more popular, more open, as it is for the masses, as it can be for the masses right now.
Wow, thank you. That's incredible. So you obviously have a lot of knowledge around cannabis and hemp. So tell us about the books that you've written. Who are they for?
Well, my first book that I wrote it's called Healthy Eating Made Possible. That book is mainly around the health benefits of hemp as a food. Half of it's a recipe book as well, with recipes from all around Asia that inspired me to create new recipes with hemp. It's also a book that really shares a lot where I come from. So my studies of Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, permaculture, and shows how all these different modalities, yoga, meditation, they all fit together for me. For me, they all are related. And continue to be related with everything I do in cannabis and psychedelics, particularly all of these modalities, which I teach now in cannabis psychedelic facilitating courses, were all in my first book. I then wrote books about hemp in general. I wrote books about hemp textile industry, hemp plastics industry, hemp cosmetics industry. I wrote one on how to grow hemp for profit. I've written 6 on cannabis psychedelics specifically. So one, generally, what is cannabis psychedelics? One on the vibroacoustic sound and how that works with the cannabis psychedelics. I've written one on intention setting and goal setting in psychedelics, one on integration with psychedelics, one in mindfulness practices with psychedelics, and how they all relate. So again, similar kind of theme that I've grown through and focused on and experienced in my life, and offering that in a very clear focus and how that can support cannabis psychedelic protocol.
So, who is your target for the course, for the cannabis facilitator course?
Well, I mean, first of all, cannabis psychedelic therapy is open to anybody with a medical cannabis license. So if they have legal cannabis, anyone can come. You don't need a psychiatrist prescription. You don't need a psychologist recommendation. None of that's required, which makes it very accessible to anyone. And because it's so mainstream and available to anybody, as soon as I started offering it and seeing the results of people who've gone through cannabis psychedelic therapy, going, wow, those results are as powerful if they were taking other psychedelics like ayahuasca, DMT, magic mushrooms. I see similar results, but this is with cannabis, and everyone can take cannabis. It's super gentle, and it's the only psychedelic where you have the actual agency to leave the psychedelic experience at any moment. So that means you can literally say stop. Now, you can't do that in the middle of an ayahuasca journey or a magic mushroom journey. You just can't. But with cannabis, you can leave the psychedelic experience and come out of that. So I was like, wow, this is a really mainstream kind of way to enter the psychedelic world. And it's completely legal for anyone to offer now and to receive. Now, I believe, like all psychedelic therapies, the ethics and the protocols are critical, how to deal with those things. So I created my own protocol for myself to offer the therapy to friends. And then I saw the potential. I was like, hold on, I have to have a pause here. Actually take some time to like clearly write this out and get my friends who are experts in particular fields. So I have, clinical pharmacists, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, psychiatrist perspective, professors, doctors, and healers, breathwork people, mind work people, somatic people, all sound experts, all different modalities to come and give me their take on their specific modality within the protocol that I developed. So the more I did that, the more I realized, well, basically I'm creating a training course, which is what I need to do if we're going to offer this nationally, because I can't be a therapist. I don't have enough time to treat more than, one or two people a day. And I don't want to be doing that every day because I don't want to be exhausted. I want to be really present for the people that I'm supporting. Now, to do that, we needed to create a course. So that's where the course comes in. And the course is available to anybody that wants to study. I'm not accepting anybody, but I will accept most people. That means you don't have to be a psychiatrist or psychotherapist, though most people who are training right now or already started the course are psychotherapists. There are quite a lot of wellness practitioners that are starting or have started, and sound healers who are looking for another modality. So if someone is used to dealing with people and working with people in a sacred space of some form, that's kind of the basics that I'm looking for so that I can teach them the details of each part of the protocol. Now, we're just facilitators, we're not guides or psychotherapists, but we are very much teaching and sharing with the facilities, learning that how to recognize when a client needs to go to a doctor or go to a psychiatrist, or there's an actual real problem and what to do with that. So all of those details are being shared by specialists in their own particular field.
Thank you. One question I have is, how harmful can cannabis get? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen as a result of cannabis use?
Well, on a physiological basis, the cannabis is literally safer than water.
Wow.
So I've written a blog post on that, and people can see it. It explains why cannabis is safer than water. Way more people die of water using water than they do using cannabis. So that's pretty fascinating in itself on a physiological basis. Now, of course, psychologically, there can be some challenges for some people. And with cannabis psychedelic therapy, we don't offer to anybody. So if we see some serious mental health issues, or people are on psychotic drugs, or they're pregnant, regular contraindications there for this kind of therapy, then we will pass them to experts in their fields rather than offering this kind of therapy. So there is some people that we won't treat because it may exacerbate their mental health conditions. Though which is kind of strange because it is really helpful for people with mental health conditions as well.
Yeah.
But there is that balance, and there is a line, and we have that line. It's not black and white, but it's grey, but it's pretty clear where that line is. So we were very careful with who we allow into this very sacred opening space, which allows someone to go deeper. They have to be ready to deal with their stuff ultimately.
I see. Wow. I'm so excited about you presenting for us at Using Plants as Medicine conference, and you're going to touch on hemp as well as cannabis. So do you have any unique offerings that you'd like to mention?
Well, I mean, I'm going to share, a little bit like we've shared today, but maybe there's some more details, some more science, more examples, specific examples. I'll be going into cannabis psychedelics in a lot more detail about, what it actually is, how it works, the process itself, before and after, and what you learn in the course. These kind of details, I'll share more. But for anyone coming, I'm willing to offer any of my books for free. They just have to ask, and I'll send them a free book, no problem. So they're available on Amazon today. You can get a print book, a Kindle version, or whatever you want. But if you want it for free and an e-version, then happy to send it to anybody that's interested to support people who are interested in plants as medicine.
That's incredibly generous of you. Thank you.
And just to add to that, if they're interested in doing a facilitator's training course, then they can absolutely get a discount on that. They just have to connect with you, and I'm very happy to give them a real discount on the course, mainly because we want to train as many people as we can now to, as more people become aware of this, we need more facilitators around the country because who can help the amount of people that need mental health support, which in my opinion is, or not just my opinion, in factually is growing and is very significant in Australia today, the people with mental health challenges.
And this is a great time to get into that space, isn't it?
It is. I mean, all the trends, and I'll share again at the conference, but all the trends for people interested in psychedelic therapy is absolutely growing from very much professionals as well as the public. So they haven't been able to match up due to the legality systems at the moment with psilocybin and MDMA, that even though they've been legal, I think only one person or one trial has finished so far in 7 months. Whereas cannabis psychedelic therapy, I've treated many people already in my own home, let alone the many other people that are going to be treated as soon as these first cohort of facilitators are trained, which they're still in the process of right now. They'll probably be finishing soon after your conference, maybe not yet, but very, very soon. And then there'll be more facilitators to offer this nationally.
Wow. So what is your vision for the future with respect to cannabis and hemp? How would you like to see it grow, or in what way should it be used?
Well, I think most of my visions for hemp have nearly been realized, which is I wanted to see hemp being used in as many stores as possible in mainstream ways. And now I go to Coles, Woolworths, my local health food store, local specialist store, and it's pretty much a hemp product in most places now. I do, and if I go to my doctor, I can get cannabis prescribed there. I want to go to my therapist and have cannabis psychedelic therapy there, and I think that's really on the verge of happening soon. So I think ultimately my vision has started, and it's just more mainstream acceptance. And the way that happens is by people like you and you and you who come to start choosing that, making the choice with your money, with your purchases. So when you have a choice to buy, a snack bar with or without hemp, as an example, you choose the one with hemp. It might cost 10 cents extra, but you are making the choice of what you want to see with every purchase you do, not just about hemp. Everything that you do, be aware of all the energy it takes, all the people, all the resources to get it there. So buy locally, buy fresh, buy unprocessed foods wherever possible, buy local made products wherever you can, and use plants in the most natural form with people that you trust and love. That's all I can say.
I love your vision. I love your work. Love your passion. And I'm really grateful that you are presenting for us at Using Plants as Meditation conference in March in Brisbane this year, 22nd to 25th of March. So the attendees will have an opportunity to ask you questions and connect with you and perhaps get an autographed book.
I'm very much looking forward to meeting with everybody. Happy to answer any questions that you have in person at the event. If not, then you can find me at cannabispsychedelics.com.au, which will have a link to the facilities course, separate website if you're interested. And I look forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you for your time today.
Cheers.
Thank you.